The cameras clicked on like a warning bell, catching every flicker of tension across the packed courtroom. Rows of spectators leaned forward, whispers rippling like a silent storm beneath the vaulted ceilings. Reporters clutched their notepads, lenses focused, waiting, hoping to catch history unfolding in real time. The air felt colder than marble, thick with judgment and expectation. Judge Michelle Childs lifted her gaze from the bench, eyes sharp, voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Representative Crockett, this is a court of law, not a stage for grandstanding." Her tone was cool, clipped, and heavy with authority, the kind that silenced entire rooms without lifting a finger. A hush fell instantly. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. All eyes shifted to Jasmine Crockett. She did not flinch. Slowly, she raised her head, meeting the judge's stare with calm, unshaken resolve. Her expression was steady, no fear, no retreat, only a quiet fire burning beneath her composed demeanor. A few in the crowd exchanged glances. Some smirked, expecting her to fold. Others watched with hope, sensing something different, something powerful, building in the silence. Judge Childs leaned forward slightly, impatience simmering just beneath the surface. "If you cannot proceed with respect for this court," she continued, "we will end this now." The words hung in the air, heavy, final, but Jasmine did not bow. She placed her hands gently on the table before her. The room waited. A pin could have dropped, and it would have echoed like thunder. Even those who doubted her felt it, the stillness before the storm, the breath before the truth. Her voice, when it came, was soft, yet unwavering. Not loud, not defensive, controlled. It was the kind of voice that didn't beg to be heard. It demanded it simply by existing. In the audience, someone whispered, "She's going to back down." Another replied, "No, look at her. She's not going anywhere." Judge Child's eyes narrowed, sensing resistance. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another degree. Every camera tilted a little closer. Jasmine inhaled, steady and deliberate. And then, just as the silence reached its breaking point, she spoke. What she said next would ripple far beyond the courtroom walls, ignite a national debate, and leave even her harshest critics stunned into silence. And yet, no one expected the words that were about to leave her lips. Long before the courtroom filled with cameras and whispered predictions, this hearing had already taken on a life far beyond legal procedure. It wasn't just about statutes or precedents. It was about what justice means in a nation that is still struggling to define it. Political analysts on morning shows spoke with urgency, framing the exchange as a battle for the soul of American democracy. Was this room going to uphold the rule of law for all, or only for those who had always wielded power? Every major network circled the courthouse like hawks. Headlines warned of confrontation, speculation, and potential downfall. Progressive voices saw Jasmine Crockett as more than a representative. She was a symbol of resilience, of marginalized voices refusing to be quiet. Meanwhile, legal traditionalists whispered she was too bold, too unrefined for the decorum of a courtroom dominated by hierarchy and centuries of precedent. They waited, not for fairness, but for a stumble, a misstep they could magnify into a national scandal. Social media pulsed with divided anticipation. Activists posted messages of hope, urging Crockett to speak truth to power. Critics replied with sneers, calling her inexperienced, unprofessional, too loud for halls built on silence and obedience. In group chats, living rooms, and campus halls, people wondered, would this be the moment she was silenced, or the moment she made history? And at the center of it all stood Jasmine Crockett. She knew exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just her reputation. This was her community's story, her ancestors' prayers, the weight of every young person told they didn't belong in rooms like these. One wrong word could cost her future committee assignments, endorsements, or even her public credibility. Yet one right word, one moment of truth spoken without trembling, could echo through generations. Judge Michelle Childs represented something just as powerful, but from the other side of the divide. To some, she was the protector of judicial order, the embodiment of discipline and neutrality. To others, she was the gatekeeper, guarding a system not built for voices like Crockett's. And though she wore the robe and held the gavel, even she could feel the cameras waiting, the public watching, the nation wondering if justice could survive ego. The air in the courtroom was not just heavy, it was charged. Each glance between Crockett and Childs was noted, dissected, reported within minutes. Commentators leaned forward in studio chairs waiting for fireworks. Protesters outside chanted about truth, accountability, and broken systems. Inside, the silence before speaking felt like a held breath across the country. Crockett's staff had warned her. This was not the moment to be emotional. This was the moment to be undeniable. The moment to show that truth did not need permission to exist. She could feel the responsibility pressing against her ribs, but she also knew something else. She had earned her place here. She had not been handed a microphone. She had fought for it, still the risk was real. A single headline could twist her words. A single raised eyebrow from the judge could frame her as disrespectful. In a world where perception often outweighed reality, Crockett had to walk the finest of lines, firm but not furious, passionate but never out of control. And it was at that razor-thin edge of history that the room grew still once more. Judge Childs adjusted her glasses, eyes locked on Jasmine Crockett with an expression colder than the marble walls around them. But then Judge Childs leaned forward, and everything shifted. Before the cameras ever turned toward Jasmine Crockett, the nation already knew the name Michelle Childs. To many, she represented the polished face of American law, steady, composed, and immovable. Raised in a world where order was prized above all, she built her life on precedent and discipline. From her earliest days in law school, professors whispered about her relentless focus. She devoured constitutional texts, argued with precision, and showed no patience for emotion-clouding judgment. Her rise was not an accident. It was designed, one ruling, one courtroom, one earned reputation at a time. In private circles across Washington, Judge Childs was admired for her meticulous interpretations of the law. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone alone carried weight, like a gavel before it struck. Colleagues described her as fair but firm to a fault. She honored tradition, even when that tradition left some voices unheard. She believed the courtroom was sacred ground, not a stage for activism or passion. Justice to her was cold, clear, and free from sentiment. Yet that same dedication built a wall between her and critics who demanded a justice system that listened, not only judged. Progressive activists pointed to past decisions where she sided with corporate power over individual struggle, where she valued decorum more than disruption, where she enforced order even when it meant silencing dissent. They argued her approach preserved hierarchy rather than challenged it. But in her eyes, stability was not resistance to change. It was the foundation required for change to mean anything at all. There were moments in her career when the nation glanced her way, questioning her judgment. One ruling involving labor rights drew fury from unions who claimed she'd chosen procedure over people. Another, a high-profile sentencing case, sparked headlines suggesting she had shown more sympathy for institutions than those unheard within them. Each time she stood her ground. No apology, no reconsideration. The law, she often said, does not bend for feelings. Supporters praised her as the embodiment of judicial integrity. To them, she was the guardrail preventing chaos in American courts. Politicians leaned on her rulings to justify their policies. Legal scholars taught her written opinions in classrooms. She became a symbol of restraint in an era of outrage-driven politics. But beneath that admiration lay a quiet criticism. Michelle Childs did not easily see those who fought their way into the courtroom, hearts full of history rather than textbooks. That flaw did not come from malice but from conviction. She believed respect was earned through composure, not confrontation. She measured worth by how well one fit into the structure, never imagining someone could rebuild that structure altogether. And so she underestimated voices that refused to shrink in the shadow of power. Voices like Jasmine Crockett's. As the hearing began, Judge Childs carried that same unshakable energy. Her eyes sharp, her words deliberate, she believed she was in full control. Around her, clerks adjusted documents, reporters whispered predictions, and viewers across the country leaned closer to their screens. This was not just a legal proceeding. It was a test of integrity, hers and the system's. But even as she maintained her dignified silence, a subtle tension rippled beneath the surface. She had handled senators, attorneys, corporate giants, all with the same unwavering authority. Yet today's encounter was different. Jasmine Crockett was not here to perform. She was here to represent something bigger. Communities dismissed, histories ignored, voices long told to wait their turn. Judge Childs noticed the calm in Jasmine's expression and mistook it for submission. She believed she had the upper hand. That authority would be enough to command silence. After all, it always had. She leaned forward slightly, readying her first challenge. Her tone would be curt, her words sharp, her conviction firm. Order above emotion. Protocol above passion. What she did not foresee was that this time, decorum would not protect her. It might just expose her. Because this time, the one sitting before her did not fear power. She understood it. And today, Judge Michelle Childs believed Jasmine would be no different. Long before the courtroom lights and national headlines, Jasmine Crockett was a little girl sitting on the porch of a small brick house, listening to her grandmother talk about dignity. Not wealth, not fame, and dignity. She grew up in a neighborhood where people worked 2 jobs and still struggled to pay the light bill, where neighbors looked out for each other because no one else would, where the system felt distant, cold, and unwilling to listen. That was her first lesson. Justice wasn't a guarantee. It was something you had to fight for. Her mother worked nights. Her father fixed cars in a dusty garage, and Jasmine learned early that survival required strength. In school, she was the student who questioned why certain history books left people like her out. Teachers called her bold. Some called her difficult. But she kept raising her hand. When the school board tried to cut funding for her community's education program, she organized a petition. She was 14. No one in power listened, but her classmates did. As she grew older, she watched friends get stopped by police for walking down the wrong street, saw neighbors evicted over paperwork errors, and heard whispers in courtrooms where justice depended more on money than truth. She didn't come from privilege. She came from the margins, and she carried every story with her. College wasn't handed to her. Scholarships, late-night shifts, and relentless determination pushed her there. When people doubted her, she didn't argue. She studied harder. Law school was another world, full of marble halls and students with last names that opened doors. She didn't fit their mold. She didn't speak their language of inherited power. But she understood something deeper. The law was written in ink, but lived in people's lives. While others joined elite firms, she volunteered in clinics, defending tenants and immigrants who couldn't afford representation. She wasn't chasing prestige, she was chasing justice. Her first courtroom case was a tenant facing eviction after losing her job. The opposing counsel smirked when he saw Jasmine, young and unseasoned. She didn't flinch. She spoke with steady conviction, outlining every violation, every overlooked detail. The judge ruled in her client's favor. Outside the courthouse, the woman hugged Jasmine and whispered, "No one ever fought for me like that." That moment changed everything. Jasmine realized she wasn't just practicing law, she was answering a calling. Activism became the heartbeat of her journey. She marched in the streets after another unarmed man was killed. She stood outside City Hall demanding accountability. She spoke at community centers where grandmothers, teachers, and teenagers packed the room just to hear someone say what they felt, that they mattered. She wasn't loud for attention. She was loud because silence had never protected people like her. Her rise into public office wasn't planned. It was demanded. Community leaders urged her to run, tired of empty promises from polished politicians. Her campaign didn't have wealth or big donors. It had church volunteers, barbershop conversations, handwritten signs, and hope. She walked door to door, telling people that their voices deserved a seat at the table. And they believed her. She won. In office, she kept speaking truth even when it made others uncomfortable. She challenged policies that hurt working families, questioned officials who hid behind procedure, and refused to shrink when they tried to label her too emotional, too loud, or too ambitious. To her, those labels weren't insults. They were proof that she was unsettling the right people. But with every victory came resistance. She received threats. Her integrity was questioned on national television. Powerful figures whispered that she was inexperienced, unrefined, a disruptor in a system built to stay the same. Yet every time they tried to quiet her, she remembered the people who didn't have the luxury of silence, people counting on her not to break. That is what led her to this courtroom, not ego, not spectacle, responsibility. She knew cameras were watching, but she wasn't performing for headlines. She was speaking for the mother who lost her son and never got answers, for the immigrant afraid to testify, for the young girl told to wait her turn. Every struggle, every protest, every heartbreak molded her into a woman who could sit before power and not bow. As she sat beneath the cold glow of courtroom lights, she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about her community, her ancestors, and every person who had ever been told to stay silent. Judge Michelle Childs saw a lawyer, but the people watching saw something else entirely, a voice forged in the fire of injustice, unafraid of consequence. The audience watching in silence didn't just see a legal proceeding, they saw representation. They saw a woman who carried their stories into the halls where decisions shaped their lives. Some watched from kitchen tables, some from crowded buses, some from hospital rooms. All of them waited, breath held, wondering if she would speak the truth they'd carried their whole lives, and that is why the stakes were more than legal. They were historical. Because this wasn't just about one hearing. It was about who gets to speak in America and who gets told to sit down. Jasmine knew that. She felt the weight of it in her chest. But she also felt peace. Every trial, every protest, every heartbreak led her to this exact moment. The room crackled with tension the moment the questioning resumed. Papers shuffled, microphones clicked on, and the air shifted into something sharper, colder. The questions weren't just inquiries anymore. They were weapons, pointed, polished, and aimed directly at Jasmine Crockett. Attorney Whitman leaned forward, his tone clipped. "Representative Crockett, are you refusing to answer this question?" The words hovered with accusation. Jasmine did not flinch. "I am answering." "You're just not listening," she said steadily. Her voice didn't waver, not even a breath. A whisper rippled across the courtroom benches. A few attendees exchanged glances, half sympathy, half disbelief. They could feel it. The shift. This wasn't just about law anymore. This was personal. Senator Harrow's chair creaked as he leaned back, arms folded. His eyes narrowed. "Then answer it clearly. Yes or no?" Jasmine's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "Yes, if you're asking whether I support due process." "No, if you're twisting it into something it isn't." Murmurs. One attorney shook his head silently. Another leaned toward his colleague and whispered, "They're pushing too hard." This could blow back. Across the aisle, a few attendees shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Others stared, unblinking, as if they didn't dare miss a second. Still, Jasmine remained composed. Not a tremor in her voice. Not a single sign of retreat. Then Judge J. Michelle Childs leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes locked on Jasmine. The room stilled. "Representative Crockett," she said, each word deliberate, "this court expects direct and respectful answers. Do you understand the implications of refusing to comply?" A hush fell over the room. Even air seemed to pause. Jasmine nodded, voice calm. "I understand the implications, Your Honor, but I will not allow my words to be misrepresented." Another wave of murmurs. A journalist scribbled faster. Cameras tightened their zoom. Senator Harrow didn't wait. He cut in. "Then let me rephrase. Do you, Jasmine Crockett, believe this court has overstepped its authority?" Now the silence was different, heavier charged. Jasmine took a slow breath. "I believe this court," she said carefully, "has a responsibility to seek truth. But truth is not served by bullying witnesses." Gasps. A few attendees covered their mouths. Lawyers exchanged glances, uneasy, uncertain. Judge Child's expression didn't change, but the air around her seemed to sharpen. Representative Crockett, answer the question directly. Has this court overstepped its authority? Jasmine didn't blink. Didn't shift. That depends, she said, on whether we're seeking justice or a headline. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Whitman slammed his palm on the table. This is out of line. Judge Childs raised a hand. Order, but no one moved. No one breathed. Jasmine's voice remained level. With respect, Your Honor, I am answering. You asked about authority. Authority must be matched with fairness. A murmur from the back. She's not backing down. Senator Harrow's voice cut through. So that's a yes? You think we're unfair? Jasmine's eyes finally shifted toward him, calm, measured, unapologetic. I think fairness isn't a threat, and if it feels like one, then maybe the process needs reflection. The courtroom was frozen. No creaking chairs, no scribbling pens, just the sound of quiet breathing and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Judge Childs leaned back slowly. For the first time, her voice was softer but colder. Representative Crockett, this is your last opportunity to answer the question clearly. Jasmine stood straighter. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It simply resonated. I will answer clearly, Your Honor, she said. But I will answer truthfully. Not conveniently. Then silence. No papers moved. No one coughed. Every gaze was fixed on her. All eyes turned to Jasmine. The silence hung heavy. Eyes locked on Jasmine Crockett, waiting. Judge Child's question still lingered in the air, stern and unforgiving. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She drew a breath and spoke. Calmly, clearly. Your Honor, she began, voice unwavering. I believe authority is only legitimate when it aligns with the Constitution, with justice, and with truth. And when authority is used to intimidate or silence that truth, then yes, it must be questioned. A gasp broke somewhere in the second row. Pens stopped moving. Cameras, those permitted in the chamber, zoomed in just a little closer. Jasmine continued. The Constitution does not grant power for convenience. It grants power for accountability. Article 1, Article 3, checks and balances. Separation of powers. These are not suggestions, they are obligations. Senator Harrow leaned forward. So you're accusing this court of violating the Constitution? Her gaze didn't shift. I'm saying that constitutional duty is not optional, and neither is courage. Another ripple moved through the audience. A few lawyers glanced down at their notes, suddenly unsure. One attendee mouthed, "Wow." Jasmine kept going. For years, people like me have been told to wait our turn, to stay quiet, to respect the process. But respect is not silence, and obedience is not justice. Her voice was steady, each word measured like a heartbeat. The First Amendment gives every citizen the right to speak truth, even when it makes those in power uncomfortable. Especially then. Judge Childs raised her hand. Representative Crockett, but Jasmine kept speaking. Not louder, just stronger. And the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law. That means protection from political theater disguised as justice. Protection from selective outrage. Protection from systems that demand respect but refuse to earn it. A flicker of surprise crossed Judge Childs' face. She tried again. Miss Crockett, you will... Jasmine didn't stop. Her voice flowed like water through stone. Your Honor, you asked for truth, so I'm giving it to you. I grew up watching courts promise justice but deliver silence. I've watched laws written to protect people like me be ignored when it was inconvenient. And I will not pretend that isn't happening here. The room tightened. No one moved. No one dared interrupt again. I stand here, she said, not just as a representative. I stand here as a black woman, as a daughter, as someone who has seen handcuffs placed on innocent wrists while guilt walked free in tailored suits. A few attendees lowered their eyes. Others sat forward captivated. My father taught me, she continued, that justice isn't real unless it protects the least powerful. My mother taught me that truth isn't truth unless you can say it in a room full of people who don't want to hear it. She didn't raise her voice, but it felt like she had. Senator Harrow shifted in his chair. This is inappropriate. Jasmine turned her eyes toward him, calm but razor-sharp. What's inappropriate is using the authority of this court to corner witnesses into sound bites. What's inappropriate is twisting lawful dissent into disrespect. That is not justice. That is performance. Gasps. Someone whispered, "She said it." Cameras flashed. One reporter's pen trembled against the paper. "And let me be clear," she said, "I am not refusing the court's authority. I am reminding it of its purpose." Judge Childs pressed her lips together. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Jasmine continued, unwavering. "Your Honor, I honor your position. I respect the bench you sit on. But respect cannot mean surrender, and truth cannot be shaped to fit someone's comfort." A cold silence swept through the courtroom. Even the air felt still. The Constitution does not belong to a courtroom. It belongs to the people. And the people expect fairness, not fear. Clarity, not coercion. A woman in the back covered her mouth with both hands. A man near the aisle whispered, "This is history." Jasmine didn't break her rhythm. "You asked me if I believe this court has overstepped," she said. "My answer is this. When power demands silence instead of answers, when truth becomes inconvenient, then the people have the right to question how that power is being used." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle like dust in sunlight. "And if that makes anyone in this room uncomfortable," she said softly, "then maybe the discomfort isn't with me. Maybe it's with the truth itself." Judge Childs sat motionless. Her gavel rested unused. Jasmine stepped forward slightly. "You want a direct answer? Here it is." She locked eyes with the judge. "I believe in this court's authority. I do not believe in its infallibility. Authority must earn respect by upholding justice without bias. If it fails to do that, then questioning it is not defiance. It is duty." The silence was thunderous. Senator Harrow leaned forward, frustration visible. "So you think you're the hero here?" Jasmine didn't blink. "I think I'm a citizen using my voice. And if that threatens anyone, they might want to ask themselves why." Whitman slammed his fist on the table. "Judge, this is outrageous." Judge Childs finally spoke, but her voice was quiet. "Order!" No one moved. No one breathed. Jasmine wasn't done. For every person who's been told their voice is too loud, too angry, too inconvenient, this is for them, she said. For every courtroom that forgot the people it was built to serve, this is for them. Her words struck with precision. Constitutional fact. Moral clarity, lived experience woven into something no one could ignore. She finished with a calm that felt like fire under ice. So no, I will not be silent. Not when justice is at stake. Not when truth is being suffocated. Because silence has never protected the innocent. It only protects the powerful. Then she stopped. No gavel. No objections. Just silence. That single answer didn't just echo in the room, it echoed across America. The moment Jasmine's words left her lips, the world outside the courtroom erupted. Within minutes, clips of her response flooded social media. The video spread like wildfire. Shared, reposted, remixed. Her voice echoed across timelines, stitched with captions like, "This is how you speak truth to power," and "She didn't flinch." Hashtags exploded into national conversation. Crockett unfiltered. Just truth in the court. Respect is not silence. By the first hour, they climbed to the top of trending lists. Millions of likes, retweets, comments. Supporters wrote, "Finally someone brave enough to say it." Others declared, "History was made today." But not everyone was clapping. Critics moved fast. Influential commentators called her words reckless, disrespectful, even dangerous. Some demanded formal reprimands. Others accused her of undermining the judiciary. Their posts spread too. Bold headlines, heated debates, split screens on television, news outlets interrupted live broadcasts. Anchors stared into cameras with urgency. "We are receiving breaking footage from the federal courtroom," they said, replaying Jasmine's words on loop. Legal analysts appeared within minutes. One said her constitutional argument was solid and stunning. Another warned, "This could set a dangerous precedent for courtroom decorum." The anchors leaned forward, whispering predictions of fallout, hearings, ethics reviews. Political talk shows lit up next. Supporters from progressive circles called it a milestone. They said, "This is what accountability sounds like." They praised her composure, her facts, her fire. Conservative voices pushed back, calling her tone an attack on judicial integrity. They demanded consequences, investigations, apologies. Memes rolled across the internet. Images of Jasmine mid-sentence, eyebrows raised, captioned with phrases like, "Say it louder," or "She brought the Constitution as a receipt." Another meme showed Judge Childs frozen in silence, captioned, "When the truth hits harder than the gavel." TikTok creators reenacted the exchange word for word. Teenagers, activists, teachers, veterans, everyone had something to say. On Instagram, celebrities shared clips to their stories. Some wrote, "Crockett for president." Others posted only a simple fist emoji. Grassroots organizations emailed supporters, "Watch this moment. Share it. History is happening right now." Meanwhile, in political offices across the country, advisors scrambled. Staffers forwarded clips to senators, representatives, campaign teams. Some whispered, "This could change everything." Others hissed back, "This is a problem." Phones rang non-stop, constituents demanding statements. Some said, "Stand with her." Others insisted, "Condemn her." Press secretaries wrote and rewrote drafts, each word weighed like a verdict. In community centers, people gathered around televisions. Older activists wiped quiet tears, whispering, "We never thought we'd hear someone say that in a courtroom." Young organizers nodded, energized. Teachers paused classes to play the clip. Students sat still, eyes wide. "That's what courage looks like," someone said. In private rooms, critics met behind closed doors. They spoke in low voices. "She crossed the line," one said. "What's our response?" Another replied, "If we ignore it, she wins. If we punish her, she becomes a martyr." Silence followed. Then, "We need a strategy." Reporters waited on courthouse steps. Microphones ready. Messages poured into Jasmine's team inbox. Interview requests, praise, warnings, threats. Some messages read, "You gave us hope." Others spat, "You'll regret this." Editorials appeared within hours. One headline read, "A new voice in an old room." Another countered, "Respect is dying in America's courts." Opinion writers debated everything: race, power, tradition, courage. They quoted her line, "Respect cannot mean surrender," calling it the sentence that cracked open a national conversation. Every major news network hosted panels. On one channel, a civil rights attorney said, "She spoke with the weight of history." On another, a former judge argued, "She disrespected the bench." There must be consequences. Viewers sat in living rooms, restaurants, airports, choosing sides with remote controls and quiet nods. Supporters organized rallies overnight. Flyers read, "We stand with Jasmine." Streets filled with people holding signs. "Truth isn't disrespect. Justice needs a voice. Power must listen." Chants rose into the night. Cars honked in rhythm. Some held candles. Others held cell phones, playing her words on repeat. Her critics didn't stay silent either. They prepared formal statements. Some called for disciplinary action. One senator tweeted, "This behavior has no place in our legal system." Another wrote, "She owes the court and the country an apology," but apologies never came. Inside homes across America, families argued at dinner tables. One person said, "She was right." Another replied, "She went too far." Someone else whispered, "Maybe we needed to hear it." Through it all, Jasmine remained silent in public. No interviews, no statements. Only her words inside that courtroom kept speaking for her, shared, debated, defended, attacked. Judge Childs stayed quiet, too. No press conferences, no clarification. Her silence became its own story. Analysts asked, "Is the court preparing a response?" Rumors spread. Private meetings, heated discussions, official reviews. By evening, the moment was no longer just a courtroom exchange. It was a national reckoning, political, cultural, personal. Supporters felt pride swell in their chest. Critics felt control slipping through their fingers. Everyone felt the shift. But the consequences were only just beginning. Long after the courtroom fell silent and the world reacted, Jasmine Crockett's words lingered, not as defiance, but as a quiet reminder that truth does not bow to power. She didn't stand to win applause. She stood because justice demands a voice, even when that voice shakes the walls of tradition. She knew that authority can sit higher, wear robes, hold gavels, but it does not own the truth. Truth belongs to those brave enough to speak it. In the days that followed, people asked why she didn't stay silent, why she didn't let the moment pass untouched. But silence has never protected the vulnerable. Silence has only ever protected comfort, privilege, and the illusion that power is always right. She chose the harder road, speaking in a place built to intimidate, in front of a figure meant to command obedience. And yet, she showed the world that dignity does not require permission. She did not speak to embarrass the judge or to provoke chaos. She spoke because millions of people outside that courtroom have been told, for generations, to wait their turn, speak more softly, respect power before respecting themselves. She knew what it felt like to be dismissed, to be told that passion is disrespect, that truth is inconvenient, that justice must be polite to be heard. But justice has never been polite. It has been loud, raw, human. Her words reached beyond law and protocol. They touched the child who was told their voice didn't matter. They reached the worker ignored at the table, the protester in the streets, the mother demanding fairness for her child. She spoke to them all when she said, without shouting, that respect is not silence and truth is not rebellion. It is responsibility. And in that moment, she reframed the confrontation, not as a clash between a judge and a representative, but as a choice between arrogance and justice. Power and truth. One sits on the bench, the other stands on its own. She understood that democracy is not just written in laws and constitutions. It lives in voices. It breathes through those who refuse to let fear decide what is spoken. Democracy is not threatened by truth spoken to power. It is strengthened by it. Without voices willing to question, challenge, and clarify, democracy becomes a script, performed, but empty. To every viewer watching, her message was clear. You do not need a title to deserve dignity. You do not need approval to speak the truth of your life. You do not need permission to defend what is right. Power may control the room, but it cannot control the meaning of courage. Courage comes from knowing who you are, where you come from, and why you cannot stay silent. Power may sit on the bench, but truth stands on its own. Her stand did not erase struggle. It did not guarantee victory, but it lit a path where justice does not whisper, where identity is not hidden to make power comfortable, where democracy includes those who have never been invited in. She reminded the nation that justice is not a performance, it is a promise that every voice matters, not because it is perfect, not because it is polite, but because it is human. And humanity cannot be ruled by silence, so the lesson was not how to win an argument. It was how to hold your ground when the world tells you to step back. How to speak even when the room grows cold. How to remember that dignity is not given, it is lived. In the end, her words were not just an answer in a courtroom. They were a mirror held up to a nation asking a simple question: do we value comfort or do we value truth? And though the moment passed, the answer still echoes. What happened in that courtroom was more than a clash of authority and courage. It was the moment Judge Michelle Childs tried to press down with power and Jasmine Crockett answered with truth. The title promised a confrontation, and it delivered. Her next words didn't just silence the room. They awakened something far beyond those walls. This moment reminded everyone watching that justice isn't quiet, and it isn't easy. It takes standing firm when the courtroom feels against you. It takes speaking even when interruption and doubt try to cut you down. Jasmine Crockett did not raise her voice. She raised the standard for what it means to defend dignity. So if you felt that, if you believe truth belongs to the people, not just to those in power, then don't let this moment fade. Like this video to push it further. Subscribe so you never miss a voice that challenges injustice. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that strength isn't about titles. It's about courage, because this isn't just content. It's a reminder that your voice matters, that silence is not safety, and that history is written by those who refuse to be dismissed. Stand for justice. Stand for truth. Stand for every voice told to wait their turn. Because moments like this don't just make headlines, they make history.